Thank you, thank you. Welcome. Bom dia, as they say in Portuguese. My name is Rich. I work here at Rick Steves as a travel consultant, so I help a lot of independent travelers plan their trips to Europe. I also have done book research in Portugal several times and traveled there independently quite a bit. So I know Portugal really well, and it's one of my favorite spots. People often ask me, what's your favorite place in Europe? And I have to say, it's hard to pick just one. Portugal is definitely in the top 2 or 3, I would say. People will often say, well, why Portugal? What's so great about Portugal? Well, I would say, why not Portugal? What's not great about Portugal? There's so many great things about Portugal. And so I'll talk about that during this talk and show you guys some pictures and hopefully get you excited to go to one of my favorite travel destinations. So most of you probably already know where Portugal is located. It's in the far southwest corner of Europe. And it's surrounded on one side by, actually on 2 sides, the north and the east by Spain, and on the west and the south by the sea. So it's pretty geographically isolated from the rest of Europe. It has some common history with Spain, but one thing I will say is Portugal is not Spain. I'm going to repeat that. Portugal is not Spain. If you go to Portugal and you speak Spanish, you will not impress Portuguese people by speaking Spanish. If you come across somebody in the countryside or at a store who doesn't speak any English, then if you speak Spanish, you can ask them, do you speak Spanish? And almost every Portuguese person will understand Spanish if they don't even speak it. So then you can go into Spanish. But you'll get a lot further actually in Portugal by speaking English. Portugal has a very long relationship with Great Britain. They actually have the longest alliance in the world, mostly due to their mutual dislike of the Spanish. So there's a lot of British people that go to Portugal. A lot of Brits will winter in Portugal, especially in the south on the Algarve coast, and all the port wine lodges in the north in Porto are actually owned by Brits. So Portugal is actually a fairly small country. It's about 35,000 square miles, about the size and shape of Indiana. So you could actually drive from the far north up here near the Spanish border, all the way down to the Algarve coast in about 6.5 hours if you drove straight through. If you're coming from Spain here in the east and you were to drive all the way to the little tip, Sagres, in the southwest corner, that's about 2.5 hours. So it's a relatively small geographic area. Lisbon, the capital, is the largest city. That's where a great deal of the population lives. And then the second biggest city is Porto in the north. There's also quite a bit of variation in territory. So from the north part of the country is pretty mountainous and green, a little more wet, and the south is a little more dry and arid, especially in the summertime. So one of the things I really like about Portugal is the landscape. It's a beautiful country. So in the north you have the Douro Valley with these old terraced hillsides, wine grapes. They've grown wine here since Roman times. Lots of varieties of wine that you've never heard of, actually. In the south you have the Alentejo region, which this is taken in the spring. So it's pretty green, but usually this area is very hot and dry. A lot of cork trees, a lot of olive trees, also a lot of grapes. It's the second biggest wine producing area. Portugal has over 350 miles of coastline, so that means lots and lots of beaches. Beautiful beaches, mostly sandy beaches. So if you like the beach, it's a great place to go. Has some vibrant big cities like Lisbon and Porto, as well as some really nice, charming small towns like Óbidos. Very unique architecture. So this is a type of architecture that's really only found in Portugal. It's called Manueline, after King Manuel. And it's sort of an interesting mix of Gothic and Moroccan. So it's kind of very distinct that you will see in different parts of Portugal. Also, the people in Portugal are very friendly people. They're very humble, very friendly. If you even just learn a couple phrases in Portuguese, they will go out of their way to be nice to you. So it's a very easy place to travel, a very safe country to travel. I used to say Portugal was kind of an unknown, out-of-the-way place, but that's certainly not true in the last couple years. It's really been discovered, and now it's a really hot destination. A lot of people are going to Portugal. So one of the reasons that people go to Portugal, or one of the things you think about when you think about Portugal, is port wine. So not only port wine, they also have a lot of really good table wine that you've never heard of. Most of it's small production, so you can't really find it outside of Portugal. But in Portugal itself, you can drink very good wine very cheaply. This is one of my favorites. It's a kind of a light, sparkling white wine called Vinho Verde, slightly effervescent, it's really good on a hot day. And Portugal is the largest producer of cork in the world. So whenever you open your wine bottle, whether it's a bottle of wine from Italy or from France, most likely that cork comes from Portugal itself. It comes from the bark of the cork tree, and they actually peel it off in sheets. And people often think, aren't they going to kill the tree? But actually, it takes about 7 years for the cork to grow back, and these trees can last up to 100 years. So, big production there. The tiles you will see all over Portugal. This is a type of tile called azulejo. I'm not sure I'm still saying that right. It's a really hard word for English speakers. But mostly blue and white tiles, but you will see lots of different colors of tiles. Entire buildings covered in tiles in Portugal. And it's one of the things about Portugal that I really like. It's very different than architecture that you'll see in other places. Also, one of the very distinctly Portuguese things that you won't find anywhere else is fado music. And fado is this sort of soulful, almost sad, longing type of music. And when you think about it, Portugal's surrounded by the sea. The men were off at sea for months on end. So their wives, their daughters, their sisters were at home. And they would miss their husbands, their boyfriends, their sons. And so they would have this sort of longing sadness, and they would sing these songs. And the really best place to hear fado is in Lisbon, but you can hear it all over Portugal. Another distinctly Portuguese term is called saudade, which doesn't really translate into English, but it sort of means like this longing for something in the past, something that's gone. And some people say the Portuguese people it sort of permeates a lot of parts of their being. They have this sort of almost the sadness of the past. Since Portugal is surrounded by the sea, fishing is a huge part of their culture, and there's lots of fresh seafood. If you like seafood, Portugal is a fantastic place to go. One of the biggest types of fish that you will see in Portugal is cod, and it comes in dried sheets like this. This is actually one of our Norwegian tour guides, Paul Johansson, and one of our Portuguese tour guides, Cristina Duarte. And I think they're negotiating some trade deal here, Portuguese wine for Norwegian cod. Most of the cod actually comes from Norway. It's been completely fished out of the waters around Portugal. So it comes from Norway or even Iceland. They have over 365 different recipes for cod. So they can make cod any number of ways. This is one of the most popular. They're little cod fritters called pastéis de bacalhau. Another very popular dish in Portugal is pork and clams. So it sounds kind of odd. You think, pork and clams, why would they put that together? It's actually quite tasty. Portuguese cuisine is not something that's really known worldwide. I mean, you can go anywhere and find Italian food or French food, but Portuguese food is more basic. It's a lot of fish and potatoes, a lot of fresh seafood, but it is a very hearty, very tasty food. And now with the resurgence of all this tourism in Portugal, there's a lot of really designer food. You can do these really fancy food tours in Lisbon and Porto. A lot of their chefs are taking traditional Portuguese dishes and putting this modern twist on them, and it's a very trendy kind of hip thing right now. Another popular Portuguese dish that you might see in Portugal is a type of bread soup. It's called a sorda, and there's probably 1,000 different recipes for this. It's like in the US potato salad, everyone has their own recipe. In Portugal, it's basically the same thing. It's a chicken broth, but then and dried old bread, usually stale bread. But then what they put in it varies. This particular one has cilantro in it, and then they put a raw egg on top, and the heat from the soup cooks it. Especially in the Alentejo region, this is a very popular dish. Sardines, and these are different than the sardines you will find in a can. These are really large grilled sardines. And quite tasty. I don't even like sardines, but first time I came to Portugal and tried these, I was skeptical, but they're very delicious. Octopus salad, another very common dish that you will find there. And this is a Brazilian barbecue called churrasco. And if you like meat, if you're a meat eater, you will be in heaven there. You can find these very affordable kind of meat buffets all over Portugal. And these guys come to your table with these different cuts of meat on these skewers, and then they carve them onto plates at your table. In the back, you have this kind of big salad bar that has different vegetables and salads, and you can go eat. But if you like to eat a lot of meat, this is definitely a good value for you when you're in Portugal. One of the most common and very affordable dishes is peri-peri chicken. It's a roast chicken, and then they have this very spicy little sauce here called peri-peri sauce that they put on it. Almost always served with French fries and salad. And then this is a dish that's common to Porto in the north. It's called a francesinha, which means a little French girl. It's sort of like a croque monsieur, if you've had that in France. And it's a ham and cheese sandwich that's then wrapped in cheese and baked, and then it's covered in this kind of gravy that has beer in it. I call it the Portuguese gut bomb. It definitely is going to feel like you have a brick in your stomach if you eat this, but it is quite tasty. So if you're going to travel to Portugal, it is a fairly easy place to travel. Quite a few people speak English there. They're very friendly people. I would definitely come armed with some good materials. I'm a little partial to our guidebooks since I'm one of the people who updates them. Our guidebooks are not all-inclusive, though. So Rick has already sort of taken out what he thinks is the best of the best and put it in this book. We've kind of already narrowed down the choices. But if there's some place that you want to go that your grandparents came from, or you just heard about some little town in the mountains that you want to explore, then you might want to look at a different type of guidebook. And for those, I usually use Lonely Planet. They're much more extensive than ours. They're maybe not updated as often, but they have a much more wide coverage. And then the DK series, I really like these as like a planning book. They're filled with colored photos and a lot of historical content. It's not really a book I would bring with me, but it's one that I would buy before I go and really read up on. Also, a good driving map is essential if you're going to be driving in Portugal. We used to say in our guidebook that driving in Portugal is one of the most dangerous places in the world, and I think that was from the pre-EU days, because I wouldn't say that's true. I'd say it's actually a pretty easy place to drive, especially if you're used to driving around Seattle or any large city. Our website is a wealth of information. We have a ton of free information online that you can go to. We have a travel forum here where you can go and ask questions and other travelers who maybe have been to this town. Let's say there's a town you found out that you have a grandmother from, and you look in all the guidebooks and you don't see anything listed about this town. You can answer a question, hey, my grandmother's from Évora. Anybody been there? And some person who lives in Évora might answer you and say, yeah, I'm from here. This is what you should see. Or someone else might say, I just got back and I stayed at this great hotel. These are some useful websites that I would suggest that I find quite useful. The first one is the Portuguese Tourism Office in the US, has a lot of wealth of information on Portugal, anything you want to find out. Portugal has a whole series of these historic inns called posadas, similar to paradors in Spain, if you've ever heard of those. And these are old convents and monasteries, sometimes castles. And they can be a bit on the pricey side, but they're kind of a unique hotel experience. And this website will list them all over the country. Also for rail schedules in Portugal, I use the Portuguese Railways website. And then there's several different bus companies, but these are the two main ones. Ava Bus and Rede Expressos, and then for budget flights, I use skyscanner.com. So Portugal is a lot of different ways to get around. It's kind of isolated from the rest of Europe because of Spain. Spain actually changed their rail gauges back in the 50s, and so it cut off Portugal from the rest of Europe by train. So you can't really travel to Portugal easily by train. There is a main rail line that runs from Lisbon to Madrid, an overnight train every night. A very old train that goes from Santiago in the north down to Porto, but just once a day. And there's a very old train that runs between Coimbra, the university town, and Salamanca, Spain, the university town in Spain. Also just goes once a day. So for the most part, you're going to want to rely on buses or maybe flights. You can fly very cheaply from various cities in Europe. For instance, last time I was in Portugal, I flew from Barcelona to Porto for about 20 bucks. On Ryanair. So if you book them ahead, they can be very cheap. There's a whole wealth of various airlines. That Skyscanner site will show you any number of them. So if you're going to be in Paris or you're going to be in Frankfurt, you could fly very cheaply often to a city like Porto or Faro or Lisbon and start your trips. So how you do your travel planning in Portugal really depends on how much time you have and what interests you have. What Rick sort of says in his book is if you had maybe 2 or 3 days, just do Lisbon. You'd fly there from some other city or maybe take an overnight train from Madrid, possibly a day trip to Sintra where the royal palaces are. If you had a week, I would say I would then, on top of Lisbon, either add the south coast, the Algarve coast, staying in a small town like Salema, one of Rick's little favorite backdoor towns, or possibly the north, do Lisbon, and then by north you could travel by train to Coimbra and Porto, the second biggest city. So train travel is really going to be between the large cities of Lisbon, Coimbra, and Porto, as well as down to the south coast and Évora as well. Otherwise, you're going to rely on buses or cars. So it really depends, on where you're going. The rail system here, this is the Portuguese rail system. It's not a very good map, but it shows the blue line is really the main line, the high-speed rail that they have in Portugal. Connects the major cities, and then these other lines are the smaller trains. They don't run quite as frequent as they're going to do in other countries like France or Spain. The high-speed trains in Portugal are called Alfa Pendulare trains, and they really connect the main core between Porto and Lisbon and Faro. The buses, Rede Expressos is one of the big companies, and this will connect the smaller towns as well as if you're heading to Spain. You can take a bus, for instance, from the south, Algarve, all the way to Sevilla. There's generally 2 to 4 a day. Cars are a really good option for getting around the countryside, especially the Algarve or maybe in the Douro Valley or the rural mountains to the east. I would say a smaller car is definitely better. You do need an international driver's license. You can get that at your local AAA office before you go. Also, some of the budget airlines I was referring to, this is Vueling, a Spanish airline. They have very inexpensive flights throughout Europe, but especially Iberia. There's a couple different cards that you might want to get in Lisbon and Porto, considering how much sightseeing you're going to do. The Lisboa card, for instance, in Lisbon, can really save a busy sightseer some time and money. It's going to cover all the major museums in Lisbon, and will cover public transit, so trolley cars, buses, funiculars, and the subway. And it will give you discounts on sites in Sintra. The Viva Viagem card here is a public transit card. So you buy this, it costs 50 cents, and then you put some money on it, and you use it like a zap system when you get on the subway, or you get on a bus, or you get on a trolley car. So it can really save you time, not having to buy tickets every time as well. The subway system in Lisbon is super modern and really easy to use. It connects the train stations, connects the airport, all the major sites you're going to want to use. And the subways are a pretty efficient way to get around town. You'll also see a bunch of trolley cars that go up and down the hills just like you would in San Francisco. And they have these modern trams that you might take out to Belém, one of the suburbs of Lisbon that has some sights to see. They also have these new little kind of Indian tuk-tuks. You'll see these all over the place in Lisbon. And you can hire them pretty inexpensively to take you up through town, to take you around. Lisbon's also a great taxi town. So you can hire taxis to take you pretty much anywhere you want to go. I always think it's important to learn a few phrases of the language when you're traveling. So even if you just learn these 3 phrases, you're going to go really far in Portugal. So Portuguese is related to Spanish, but it is definitely different. If you say hello in Portuguese, you say hola. Hola. Can everybody say hola? Hola. So it's similar to the Spanish hola, but it doesn't have the H, and it's stressed on the A. Hola for hello. Good day or good morning is bom dia. Bom dia. Bom dia. And then thank you, if you're a male, is obrigado. Obrigado. If you're a female, you would say obrigada. Obrigada. So obrigado and obrigada, depending if you're male or female. It doesn't matter if you're talking to a male or female. If I'm a man, I always say obrigado. If you are a woman, you will always say obrigada. So if you just learn these phrases, Portuguese people will just beam. They'll be so happy that you even attempt to speak their language. It's not a language that a lot of people speak. We do have some tours throughout Europe, and our Portugal tour will show you the highlights. So if you don't want to travel on your own, our Portugal tour can be a really good option to kind of see the main sites in Portugal. This map shows the nights that you will spend in each location. So it starts in Lisbon for 3 nights. You head down to Évora and the Alentejo for 1 night. Then up to the small town of Óbidos for 2, where you see some of these religious sites of Fatima, Alcobaça, and Batalha, as well as the beach town of Nazaré. Then you head to the university town of Coimbra for 2 nights, the Douro Valley for a night, and it ends in Porto. The only thing I don't like about this tour is that it does not go to the Algarve coast, which is one of my favorite locations. But it's very easy to remedy. After you do the Portugal tour, you can fly. There are 2 flights a day on Ryanair that go down to Faro. Very cheap if you book them ahead, less than $50. So what I usually recommend clients who are coming in for a consultation and they say, I'm doing the Portugal tour, what should I do afterwards? I would say, my first choice would be to fly down here and spend 3 nights in Salema. And then you could go to Faro and fly from Faro back to Paris or London or another city, or come back to Lisbon and fly home from Lisbon, depending on where you're going. So it's a really good way to kind of see what we consider the best of Portugal. We have some fantastic guides in Portugal. These are 3 of them. This is Maria Jose, Cristina Duarte, and Robert Wright. So some of the sites that I'm going to talk about today in Portugal, I'm going to start in Lisbon here, the capital. From there, we're going to head up to Coimbra, Porto, the Douro Valley, then down to Évora, and end at the Algarve. There's any number of ways that you can plan your trip to Portugal. I like to end it in the Algarve because this is one of my favorite places to relax. So I like to, I'll recommend people will fly into Porto and work their way down. But most flights are going to come in out of Lisbon, so you could do this any number of ways. So Lisbon, the capital, sort of an interesting mix of San Francisco meets Morocco. It really is. It's very similar to San Francisco in a lot of ways. It's about the same latitude as San Francisco. It has a bunch of hills. Even has this bridge, looks kind of familiar. It's the same guy who designed the Golden Gate Bridge. This is the 25th of April bridge, crosses the River Tejo in Lisbon. Of course, trolley cars, just like you see in San Francisco. And then this Manueline architecture, very distinct to Portugal, that sort of looks like it's something of a combination of Gothic and Moroccan. Also these tiled buildings everywhere, like you would see in the Middle East. And it's also an interesting city of sort of old and new. So Lisbon's a very old city, has Roman roots. So you see a lot of these old buildings. This is the Alfama neighborhood, very old section of town with these twisty, windy streets and red tiled roofs. But then you have these very modern structures like the subway system. This is the Oriente train station, very modern, and also the Vasco da Gama Bridge, one of the longest bridges in the world. Wow. Crosses the River Tejo. So you have this interesting mix of old and new. There's also a city of great views. Because of all the hills, there's all these different viewpoints in the city. This one is just below the castle. If you're going up to see the castle, you have they're called miradors, overlooks the Alfama neighborhood, the old fisherman's quarter. Up at the castle, which is the highest point in the city, you have this view from their viewpoint. Fantastic view overlooking the entire city. And then there's from the Santa Justa elevator. This is an old steel elevator that was designed by one of the students of Eiffel who designed the Eiffel Tower. From the top of that has a nice view of Rocio Square. Lisbon, as we know it, has been rebuilt since 1755 when they had this huge earthquake, one of the biggest earthquakes recorded in Europe. And it happened on All Saints' Day. Most people were in church in the morning. And the earthquake toppled quite a few buildings. And then because back then everybody cooked with fire and used candles for light, a lot of fire started. So the city caught on fire and started burning. The earthquake then caused a tsunami which came in and wiped out a big portion of the city. So a lot of the city was destroyed. The king at the time hired this guy, the Marquis de Pombal, to redesign the city in a very modern grid plan. And he did it in record time. Within a month, a lot of the city was already started to be rebuilt. And he rebuilt much of the old city here in the little valley. This area is called the Baixa, and a modern grid plan. Before that, it was a medieval street plan with very narrow, windy, twisty streets. And you can still see some of that windy medieval plan in the Alfama neighborhood, which is on the hill tumbling down from the castle, and the Barrio Alto over here. But the Baixa area was completely rebuilt on a grid plan, and he put these squares in. Down here, up here you have the Praça Figueira and Rocio Square, and down by the river you have the Praça Comercio. Some of the first earthquake buildings ever designed were built after that. So these buildings were built after the 1755 quake, and they were built with these wood joints, wood structure inside with brick and stone on the outside, and were built to resist earthquakes and shaking. Rocio Square, I just love this square. I love you see this all over Portugal, the way they do the cobblestones in the streets to look like waves, kind of tying in with the sea. And remnants of the earthquake, you can still see some of it in Lisbon. Up here, above Rocio Square, you have this old convent, the Convento do Carmen, and it was an old convent that destroyed during the earthquake. The ceiling fell in. You can tour it. They decided not to build it, but leave it as a memorial to the earthquake victims. The barrio, heading down from the Barrio Alto into the Alfama, you have these twisty, windy, narrow little streets. It's just a really fun area to explore. This is sort of how pre-earthquake Lisbon looked. Not a place where you could really drive a lot of cars through here. Heading from Rocio Square down towards the Praça do Comercio, you have this long street lined with shops leading through this arch to the main square of the Praça do Comercio. And this is where a lot of the trolleys leave that go to Belém. It's a really fun, kind of active square, but most people in Lisbon don't really use it much. There's also a great little wine center over here at 9 o'clock where you can taste different kinds of wine. And you buy a little electronic card for a minimum of like €3, and then you can go taste all these different wines. And they change the wines about every week. I don't think Lisbon has a lot of top-notch sites. Like you don't have museums like the Louvre or Roman ruins like you'd find in Rome. But they do have some interesting small museums that are very unique to Lisbon. The Gulbenkian Museum is a small eclectic museum. It's Rick's favorite museum in Lisbon. And it's an interesting collection of jewelry and sculptures, paintings, furniture. Very kind of fun little museum. Also the Museum of Fado. So Fado Music, they have their own museum. It's something that's very unique to Lisbon. I wouldn't say it's like a blockbuster site, but it's something that you won't find anywhere else. Also the Tile Museum. This is built in an old convent, and it has some fantastic tiles. Just outside of the main part of the city, you have this suburb called Belém, and there's several great sites that you can see here. The Monument to Discoveries is built to commemorate all the famous Portuguese explorers. And one of the reasons that Portugal became such a strong seafarer was this revolution in ship design called a caravel. And here you have Henry the Navigator in front holding one of those caravels. Some of the Portuguese explorers were really responsible for discovering a lot of the world. So you had Diaz, Vasco da Gama, Cabral, who discovered Brazil, and Magellan. So one of the other main sites that you can see in Belém is the Monastery of San Geronimo, which is built in this Manueline style of architecture, very unique. Beautiful gardens in front. And the Belém Tower, which is another sort of Manueline style, used to be the sort of guarding entrance to Lisbon Harbor. The Carriage Museum there is a whole museum of different royal carriages throughout Portuguese aristocracy. But my favorite site in Belém is this little pastry shop. They have these little custard tarts you will see all over Portugal. They're called Pastéis de Belém, but that shop is the original one that makes them. And for about $2, you can go in and get a little custard tart in this tiny little shot of espresso called the biquia. Fantastic, especially when they're hot out of the oven. Near Lisbon, you have the number one day trip I would say would be Sintra. And it's a really easy day trip from Lisbon. You can take a train there. It's about 45 minutes. The trains go very frequently. And it has 3 palaces that you can tour there. So my favorite is the Pena Palace. Very unique style. Looks like something out of Dr. Seuss. It's very beautiful. And it was also the home of the last Portuguese king, who they booted out in 1910. Just down the road, you have the ruins of the Moorish castle, which almost reminds me of something you would find in Ireland. It has these big stones all covered in moss, lots of steps, beautiful views from the top there. And then you have in the town itself the National Palace, which I think is the least interesting. So if you were going to visit Sintra, I would start with the Pena Palace and the Moorish castle. Then when you go back down into the main part of the town, see how you feel, and you could see this as a last option, I would say. The hike down, if you hike down from the Pena Palace back into town, you pass through these beautiful gardens and some wooded trails. It's a really nice little walk. And then just west of Sintra, you have the westernmost point of Europe. It's called Cabo da Roca. And it's a bit of an overrated site, I would say. The coast itself is quite beautiful. But all that's there is really this little plaque that says it's the westernmost part of Europe. And you can get a little souvenir certificate that says you were there. Not a whole lot. Another very easy day trip from Lisbon is Cascais, which is just a short train ride away, just about 40 minutes west. Sort of the weekend getaway of the Lisbon elite back in the day. Now it's got some beautiful beaches and seafood restaurants. It's just a fun little escape for the weekend or for a day if you're in Lisbon. From Lisbon, we head north to the university town of Coimbra. This is a great, small, mini Lisbon, famous for its university, which is one of the oldest in Europe. You can see it up on the hilltop here. The old part of the town has all this great, beautiful architecture, pedestrian streets all lined in marble. It can be a bit slick if it's rainy, so be careful. And then you can walk up to the castle. You have sort of up to the university. You have sort of 2 options. You can walk through the main part of the city. At the end, there's an elevator that takes you up. Or you can walk this way, kind of wind up the little streets. Rick has a great little walking tour in his book, where you kind of take the elevator up and then you walk back down this street from the university. You'll see some graffiti up there near where all the fraternities are. These guys don't like McDonald's very well. The gate of the university, and you can tour the university itself. It's quite a beautiful place, especially the library here. This has some of the oldest books in Europe. And this picture I kind of snuck. You're not supposed to take photographs inside. So I kind of held my camera and took it. But it's got all this beautiful carved woodwork with gold overlay. And if you go in May, that's when the students are graduating. So you'll see a lot of students around town in these caps and gowns. And Coimbra is unique in that it has this type of fado where it's only sung by men. You will have these male groups going around singing fado music. And just outside, you have some Roman ruins of Coimbra. These are not as impressive as something you'd see out of Rome, for instance, but some of the best mosaic floors I've seen. They're pretty fantastic. From here we head north to Porto. This is the working town, and Rick says, or in his book, that Coimbra or Porto works while Lisbon plays. And it's a bit of a work-a-day, kind of a grungy town, but it's really having this rebirth these last couple years, and there's a lot of construction and remodeling going on. It's a fantastic city, I think. The River Douro runs right through it, where you have all these old wine boats. And on the other side of the river is where all the port wine lodges are. So if you really like port wine and you want to do some port wine tasting, you can go over there, and there's quite a few of them that we list in our guidebook. There's so many different types of wine. The first time I came to Porto, I was shocked. I didn't think I liked port. But there's all these different ones. Some of these late bottle vintage ones can be quite expensive for a tasting. So you could spend like $100 for just a taste of it. The area along the river called the Ribeira has all these beautiful kind of unique buildings. I really like, one of my favorite hotels we list in the book is here, the Guest House Douro, and it's been remodeled, one of these old Ribeira houses. Also, the Stock Exchange Palace, which you think, how could that be an interesting site? But it actually is pretty cool. They built it to really impress people, to attract foreign trade. They didn't let you take any pictures inside, but all the various rooms are decorated. They have a Moroccan room that's all done in this plaster work. They have another one that's all done with gold leaf and inlay. And they do English language tours almost hourly there, so it's a really easy place to visit. There's also another wine tasting center just to the right. The main square, Avenida de Aliados, this has a lot of great Art Nouveau architecture and one of the coolest McDonald's you will ever see. So I kind of have mixed feelings about this McDonald's because you see this all over Europe. I've seen this in Tallinn, in the old city wall. There's this really old historic part of the city that there's a McDonald's built there. Well, in this case, this was an old cafe from the 1800s that was slated to be torn down, and McDonald's bought the property and they left it pretty much as it was. They left the interior intact with all the stained glass. They even left the old coffee bar in there. So it's even a cool place just to pop in and take a look at. It's one of the stops on Rick's walking tour in Porto, but it's also the classiest place, I think, to have a Big Mac if you really want one. This is my favorite church in all of Portugal. It's the tile church. And I just love all this blue and white azulejo tile that's all covered all over it. The other church there, this is kind of the symbol of Porto. You see it sticking up the Claragos Tower. And you can climb the steps to the very top for this fantastic view overlooking Porto. Very famous bookstore here that, I don't know if this is true, but I've heard a rumor that J.K. Rowling, who wrote Harry Potter, was really inspired by this bookstore. And now, it used to just be a regular bookstore, but now you have to pay an entrance fee to go in. But it's just beautiful. It's got this beautiful wooden stairway. And I think the entrance fee actually helps to keep the place up and keep it going. The old train station here, the São Bento train station, this is not the station that you would arrive if you're coming from Coimbra or Lisbon. But you could take a connecting train from that station to this station. And inside has these beautiful tile murals depicting all the history of Portugal. From here we move on to the Douro Valley, and you have these terraced hillsides with all these wine grapes. You can take a boat from Porto for the day to go up here if you want to just go for the day and then either come back by bus or train, or you could go up and spend a couple nights. I think it's really better to have a car up here. You can stay at a small little quinta or one of the posadas up there, do some wine tasting. The main town, Paso de Regua, I don't think is a highlight as far as a beautiful little town, but it's a really good transportation hub because you can take the train here or the boat. Lot of wineries. This is one of the ones we list in our book, Quinta de Moracos, small family-run little winery, and you can rent a room there and stay. It's a fantastic place to stay. You also have some posadas just outside of town. And it's a beautiful old manor house that was turned into a posada. Inside all this tile work and a fantastic view. So there's a lot of these type of posadas all over the Douro Valley that you can find on that Posadas website. Now we're going to head back down south heading back down towards the southern part of the country. We have Nazaré on the west coast. This is an old fishing village that's turned into a resort town and has some of the biggest surfing waves in the world. If you come here in the summer, it can be quite crowded. And you can rent these little tents. They do still have some traditional life that survives. The women here are known for wearing these 7-layered petticoats. And this lady's drying fish on the fish racks. A lot of them will rent rooms in their house. So if you're looking for a place to stay, you can actually show up in a place like Nazaré, and they will have these little books with pictures of their home, and you can rent a room there, and they'll take you to their house and stay very, very affordably. Once you go past the main square, there's a lot of these little quiet little back streets that are loaded with some small seafood restaurants where the locals eat. The main square, you can take a funicular up to the top. The city's kind of divided into two parts. You have the lower town where the beach is, and then the upper town, you take this funicular up, it's called Sitio. And up there you have these little viewpoints overlooking the sea and the fantastic view overlooking Nazaré. Up there is also where you have the cathedral, the Lady of Nazaré Church. And this gal who's always up there every time I go there, she's selling nuts and little paracebes, which are these barnacles. They're actually quite large, about the size of your finger. You think, barnacles, it doesn't sound very good. Portuguese people love to steam these barnacles, and then they eat them. They kind of pop them out. It's almost like a little shrimp, and they have it with a cold beer. Very unique. Near there, you have 3 important religious sites. You have Alcobaça, which is a beautiful church. It's famous for the burial place of the Portuguese Romeo and Juliet, Pedro and Inés. And we have a whole little story in our guidebook that tells you all about that. Second important church, Batalha. This is the site of a very famous battle that the Portuguese repelled a Spanish invasion. And inside has this beautiful stonework. And one of the most important Catholic pilgrimage sites in Europe, Fatima. If you come on the 12th to the 13th of the month, it's going to be quite crowded. There's a lot of pilgrims who come from all over Portugal, all over Europe really. And they like to walk this esplanade that goes between the two. You have the cathedral here, and then this church on the other end. And you'll see people walking on their knees the whole length of it. Just south of there, we have Óbidos, the cute little castle town. This also has a posada you can stay in right in the entrance of the town. And it's all surrounded by medieval walls. Got to be a little careful because there's no railings here. This is just a lawsuit in the making if this was the US. The entrance of the city with the main gate, you have this beautiful tile work. The top, this is no longer tile, it's been painted because during the 1755 earthquake that all fell down and they never did put it back up. Very narrow little streets all lined with chocolate shops and little restaurants. Beautiful little town. It's one of my favorite places to stay the night actually because most people just go here as a day trip from Lisbon. It can be really crowded. But if you stay the night, you have the town to yourself. Further south, we have Évora in the Alentejo region. This is a university town and very old. It's been a town since Roman times. It's known for its Roman temple. Also has another posada right behind it that you can stay in. That's an old monastery. And famous for its bone chapel. If anybody's been to Kutna Hora in the Czech Republic, they had a similar chapel there. It's all lined with human bones. And some very narrow little streets. I really like this little sign here, and they have it in Portuguese and English, saying, "Is your car small enough to fit?" Ha ha ha. I did not try to drive my car through that. I mean, that is a really small space, but you can tell that people have tried to drive through here. Another reason to have a very small car when you're renting a car in Portugal. Just outside of Évora, you have this old stone circle that's 1,000 years older than Stonehenge. And the first time I went here, I was really surprised there was nobody there. Now, it's not as impressive as something you'd see in Stonehenge, but just the fact that these rocks are still surviving after all this time is pretty impressive to me. And you can see these faint carvings in them. There's a guy we list in our book who does tours out of, his name's Mario, and he does tours out of Évora. He has a company called Évora Megalithic. And he knows everything about all the prehistoric sites around Évora. You can hire him for the day. He will pick you up at your hotel and take you out to some of these stone circles. It's pretty interesting. On the south coast of Portugal, we have 3 towns that we like. Tavora is one of them. It's over near the Spanish border. Most of the Algarve has kind of become like the south coast of Spain. It's a lot of golf resorts, a lot of Northern Europeans and Brits, so it doesn't really feel Portuguese. But there's a few of these three little towns that really do. Évora is a nice little place. I really like it. It has a very old stone Roman bridge. Nice little park. They do concerts here sometimes in the summer. And near there is a little island called Ilha del Tavora, and you have to take a little boat out there. But it's a little sandbar. Has all beautiful sand beach there. From here we go to Lagos, which is one of the largest towns on the Algarve coast. Some very interesting rock formations and beaches around Lagos, including some caves a little further east. And the old town is got a lot of maze of narrow pedestrian streets. I really like this tile building in the square here. This whole, it's kind of a modern kind of green tile, but at the top, even these are tiles. And it's famous for the original slave market. So most of the African slaves that came to the New World came through Lagos. And this is the old slave market building. It's now been turned into a museum, which is kind of interesting to see, I think. We end in Salema, which is Rick's favorite little Portuguese back door. If you want a place to just chill out and relax, this is a great place to go. And I always end my trips in Portugal in Salema because I like to just chill out on the beach, drink some caipirinhas, have some good seafood, and relax. The beach here is quite nice. The town's kind of divided into two parts. You have the old town here below, and then up above, this is a lot of the condos that are owned by Brits and Germans, so a more modern part of the town. It's one of the few places you'll ever see Rick relax. And here he is at one of our favorite hotels we list in the guidebook, the Pension Mare. It really just has one main street going through the old town. And then the beach there, beautiful. I just love to swim here every day. It still is a fishing town, so there are fishermen who fish every day here, mainly for octopus. They put these pots down in the water. Octopus crawl into the pots. They think it's safe, and then they pull the pots up, and the octopus are in the pots. Really nice to walk on the beach at sunrise here. Beautiful, beautiful place. And then just west of there, an easy day trip if you have a car, you have the far southwest little tip of Europe called Sagres. And Sagres is famous for several things. It has these beautiful cliffs and fantastic surfing beaches here. A lot of surfers love this part of Europe. You'll see fishermen fishing right off the edges of the cliffs, and Henry the Navigator had a fort here. It really did look like the end of the world. You could see this sort of wind-swept, barren landscape, and you can understand why people thought that this is where the world ended. There's an old sundial. Well, they think it was a sundial. They're not really sure. And then these cliffs that just drop off right into the sea. Obrigado. Obrigado. Thank you very much.